Hello, welcome. So we're looking at the URC weekend that was and slingshotting into round two. Our rugby coverage as ever is with thanks to Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. Grassroots, the Energia AIL, and they are official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. Their Rugby for All initiative, as you know at this stage, I think welcomes everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. And if you want to learn more about Energia's exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Happy to say, in studio for the first time in quite some time, Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent. We're back, Cian.
We're back, Joe. It's been too long.
And Ian Madigan once again in studio.
Yeah, great to be back again.
Something's up.
Something's brewing.
Loads to get into. I should mention at the top, by the way, keep an eye out for something that we're going to try and do over the season. This was all really Ian's idea, and you sort of made it happen, had some conversations with the URC. So, short version, quite often in a sport like rugby, it's complicated, and we'll talk about things here which can be hard to visualise. So, I'd say maybe once a week is about the right amount. We will take something we've talked about here, and then we will get actual footage of the URC games, and it's a thing on box kicking or attacking play. Ian will talk you through the pictures, and it'll be on social media or YouTube, or keep an eye out generally in that sphere. And yeah, you'll just get a little bit of extra intricacy, or maybe if something is very intricate to explain just with words, the visuals will be there. Hopefully it enriches everybody's enjoyment of URC and rugby tactics and all of that stuff. That's about the gist.
Yeah, really well explained. Like the game can be...
Thank you.
Great sales pitch.
Yeah, I love it. Look, the game can be as complicated or as simple as you make it. And what I want to be able to do is give people a better understanding of different elements of the game. So if they're watching it the following week, they might have a better understanding of why teams are box kicking a lot or what they're focusing on at the breakdown. So yeah, we'll largely be focused on the Irish sides, focusing on Ulster this week, and their good attacking play against the Dragons. And yeah, look, we'll see how see where it will take us, and happy to be guided by our listeners as well. If they want to see something in particular, let us know.
Well, they're not shy in letting us know things. So they'll be in touch with their reviews. Don't worry. So, like Ian said, keep an eye out. Week one is a clip about Ulster's attacking play, which we'll be discussing anyway in the pod. It's an extra bonus addendum to what we're doing here in the podcast anyway. I guess we have to start with Leinster, don't we? Given the nature of Stormers 35, Leinster 0, and then Leinster are in South Africa, obviously this week. They stay on to play the Bulls, 5:30 Saturday. So suddenly we're all sitting a bit straighter to see what happens there. There are any number of stats you can read out about this game. I'm sure people have heard them at this stage. The first time since September 2008. Lehman Brothers was just collapsing. It was a different world. That Leinster were held scoreless in a game. That was against Munster. I don't remember that. 18-0. Were you playing?
Just before I came on the scene.
Get Madigan in here.
I'm sure I would have been blamed if I was.
Yeah, so 18-0, but 35-0. And it was only 6-0 at half-time. And then they lost the second half 29 points to 0. I must confess, I was in a Ryder Cup bubble. I didn't see this game. So I'm fascinated to know what you made of it. For people who didn't see it, I suppose what jumped out to me in advance was this was a Leinster team with Jimmy O'Brien fullback. I thought, okay, good. Tommy O'Brien on the wing, excellent. Centre pairing of Robbie Henshaw, Kieran Frawley, good. Jordan Larmour the other wing, good. Prendergast, Luke McGrath. And then front row, you've Slimani there with Jack Boyle and Gus McCarthy, who've proven they're going to be really, really good big players. Diarmuid Mangan, Brian Deeney in the second row. Then Ryan Baird with Scott Penny and James Culhane. In advance of the game, looks fine. So tell us about the game.
Yeah, Leinster were really beating out the gate in all facets of the game. The scrum was under pressure, barring I think the first scrum of the game and the last scrum of the first half where they got a penalty. It was largely going backwards. The line-out was completely dismantled. They lost the aerial battle. They lost the physical battle, both sides of the ball. There were some huge tackles coming in from the Stormers players, two in particular, and Culhane and O'Brien, that very much dictated, the intent that the Stormers had. At half time, I thought, Leinster had played really poorly in that first half, but they were only, I think, 6-0 down. And I was thinking, this has happened so many times to Leinster in the past, where other teams have had their purple patch, but not got the scores on the board. Leinster get their ducks in a row. They'll come out in the second half and probably beat the Stormers. You know, they'll get their attack game going, they'll sort out their set piece, and it just didn't happen. They came out after half time, Stormers scored a quick penalty, and then Prendergast, who'd actually had a pretty good first half and a team that was playing poorly, went for a kind of chip crossfield kick, got semi-blocked, and Stormers scored immediately off that breaking ball. So now you're no longer 6 points down, you're 16 points down, 3 scores away from home. And it was like the Stormers realised that they were the far better side and just really put their foot on the gas and continued to apply pressure. And Leinster really didn't throw any punches at all in the game. Like, I'd struggle to tell you, apart from a few good moments from Tommy O'Brien on the right wing, where he was very physical and carried the ball well, another standout performance from Leinster, or even just a solid performance from another Leinster player. They were beaten out the gate here, and it wasn't like it was an early red card that dictated this performance.
Even though their discipline was very poor, it was 16 penalties I think they gave away. They had 2 yellow cards, which just signifies a team that was under serious pressure. I thought the breakdown as well, they lacked a bit of aggression, I thought, a bit of physicality. They only played 1 pre-season game. Now, that to me seemed a bit unusual. They were beaten by Cardiff. Not that you'd read a whole pile into the result, but they looked a little short. They looked a little bit light going into that game. And I suppose the context, it's important to provide that even though Leinster were missing all of their Lions players, Jamie Osborne didn't travel due to injury. The Rugby Championship is obviously still ongoing at the moment, so the Stormers were missing their Springbok players. Look at what Sasha Feinberg Mgamazulu did for the Boks at the weekend. So they've been playing Curry Cup though over the last few weeks, and they looked far more battle-hardened than Leinster were. So you saw Robin McBride earlier this week coming out apologising to the supporters, really. First game of the season, not great. So I don't know, the coaches maybe reflect on, you know, how they went about pre-season, because like you mentioned, Joe, they're going to Pretoria this weekend. In terms of like looking for a venue to bounce back on, you probably couldn't pick worse in the league. So it's not panic stations by any means, but still really concerning, because like you outlined, there was a lot of quality in that team. And I thought back to when Leinster were in South Africa last season, when they beat the Sharks, I think it was 10-7. Like, I thought that was low-key one of Leinster's most impressive results and performances of the season. I know the Sharks blow a little bit hot and cold, but I was having a look back earlier today on the team that was picked to beat the Sharks in Durban, and you'd have to say on paper it was weaker than the Leinster team that was there at the weekend. So I don't think they'll be looking for any excuses. They just got it so wrong, like I said, in all facets of the game, and they're up against it now because, like I said, they're playing the Bulls at the weekend.
Given the quality, are we not all very inclined to say, well, this is just clearly early season rust and nothing to worry about whatsoever?
Yeah, part of you can, and you can look for excuses. You know, a disjointed pre-season where you've got players being drip-fed back. So you start off, Leinster go to the last game of the season, they make the final for the Bulls. The Stormers would have had, 2 or 3 weeks off before that. And then you look at the one pre-season game that they played. It was very hard to find a pre-season fixture this year because the top 14 starts 3 weeks before the URC. The Premiership sides decided to play the Premiership Cup as their warm-up games. So unless you wanted to play against other URC sides or interprovincial games, which I don't think coaches particularly want for a pre-season game, it was very difficult to find a match. And then you've got players being drip-fed back. So players who didn't go on the international tour with Ireland, players are obviously with the Lions. So you've ended up with a very disjointed pre-season for Leinster. Maybe it was hard for them to tell where they were at. But I actually did the commentating for the pre-season game against Cardiff, and there was a few areas of concern for me there. I know it's only a pre-season game, but like there was one instance or a couple of instances where the coaches were shouting on. There wasn't a big crowd there, so the coach's voice could carry, but they were shouting on, in essence encouraging the kick chase to speed up. For me, that's a non-negotiable when you're wearing the blue of Leinster. There's certain
that suggests just lack of fitness.
It could suggest lack of fitness, and maybe like the strength and conditioning programs, they're not set up, like Leinster's isn't set up to peak for round 1 of the URC. They're probably set up to peak for Europe, or maybe to peak for round 5 of the URC where they're playing Munster, and then the players are heading into the November internationals really hitting their strides. Did they look a little bit leggy? Yes. But I just thought it was an unusual request from coaches to be demanding, like, a young group of players to be upping their effort in the kick chase, something that doesn't require a whole lot of talent. So that was a small red flag for me, but I didn't think a whole lot of it. But then you back it up with the really poor performance against Stormers. You're going, well, they are under pressure now. They've already lost as many games as they lost in the URC last year, one round in. They're now playing arguably the toughest home game of the season against the Bulls. So it's not unthinkable that Leinster will be 0 points out of 10 after round 2. And you'll have, the likes of Munster, Bulls, Stormers, Glasgow, that will have accumulated close to 10 points potentially. Like it does leave you a bit of a mountain to climb to get back to first in the log, which, as we've seen over the last few years, is really important for winning this competition.
The point you make about pre-season is very interesting. And the kick chase, if memory serves, was really poor in the Northampton game as well, wasn't it? Like that was one of the major things that you could see, that the effort level just wasn't there at different stages. But I was kind of thinking the opposite in terms of their pre-season, because look, the Lions players have remained back in Dublin. I don't know who's coaching them. It seems like all the senior coaches are over there. But to me, it would it not have been quite settled, because the group who played at the weekend, I know Jimmy O'Brien was there with Ireland, he might have come back a couple of weeks later, Jack Boyle, similarly Gus McCarthy, but by and large those guys would have had a decent block of pre-season together. And I don't know if maybe, I'm not saying you're giving them a pass for it, but do you not think that they would have had a decent pre-season together, the team that played? Obviously the frontliners aren't there, they're on a separate programme, but I would have thought they would have had a decent enough time to put in a much more cohesive performance than that.
I know. But like, if you don't accept it's early season rust, then you're saying, oh my God, they've all gone off a cliff. And that's just not likely. It's just not like no. Robbie Henge has a bad player now. Jimmy O'Brien, Tommy O'Brien, Kieran Frawley, Larmer, Prendergast, etc. It's just, I honestly, I would just, like, that's the only explanation for them losing 35. If this was maybe 24-21 and certain trends weren't good, you might dig into it a bit deeper. But this is such a, an anomaly.
Their response will be interesting this weekend. And your point is spot on, Ian. I totally agree with you that you'd expect more from guys who must be desperate to get an opportunity to play. Because once, let's say, the Munster game rolls around, like that is the unofficial start to the season in many ways. You're rolling into then, you're talking about Ireland call-ups. These are the games that you need to be putting your hand up. And like you're saying, very interesting to hear that. The game was on Atala, wasn't it, against Cardiff? If coaches were shouting, for more effort, very unusual. So that's what I mean by it's not panic stations at all. But you look at the manner of the 4 tries that the Stormers scored. They did an absolute number on the Leinster maul and the set piece. They actually had another try chalked off for double banking early on for the maul as well. So it wasn't exactly a systems failure in terms of like looking at Jack Nienarber's defence, except for the last try, which the defence just got completely opened up. You mentioned the Prendergast error, and it was a bit of compounding errors because his restart for the start of the second half went short as well. Now the Stormers ended up gathering it, so they played off advantage, and then I think the try was 2 or 3 minutes later, so got into that bad habit of sort of compounding errors. So I don't think it was like a systematic failure of Jack Nienarber's defence. I think it's more Robin McBride needs to probably have a look at the pack and say, okay, we had 2 inexperienced second rows in Brian Deeney and Diarmaid Mangan, both of whom started that Sharks game, which I mentioned earlier. Look, 2 young guys, but like you've got Rabbit Slimani, like unbelievably experienced in the front row, Jack Boyle, Gus McCarthy, Ryan Baird, who had a pretty quiet game. He finished the season so brilliantly last season, but he was pretty anonymous, I thought, in it. They're the kind of games that you want him standing up. So I think it's more maybe McBride looking at the pack rather than sort of Nienarber looking at, okay, what went wrong with the defence, as he obviously will be.
I suppose the tricky aspect for them is if they are a little undercooked, not much you can do in a week with the Bulls waiting for you.
No, like the Bulls, we know what the Bulls are going to bring. It's a clear blueprint that they play off. And second half, when you're playing at altitude against them earlier in the season, it's hell. They're going to look to physically take them on. Like they I think it was the Ospreys they played last week, and they fairly dismantled the Ospreys in the second half. But you can very much change your mindset for the week in training. You can go, right, we are going back to defensive and attacking basics where we can play a high percentage game, both sides of the ball, and no matter what, a 35-0 loss isn't getting replicated. Is it a game plan to win? Not necessarily. But I think Leinster are going to go in with a clear game plan. It's going to be an aerial contest. They've got to play a more territorial battle against the Bulls, keep turning them. You don't necessarily want to get into an arm wrestle around the middle of the field when they've got really good poaching threats. And then the other side of it is the scrum. Like the scrum was under big pressure at the weekend. I wouldn't be overly critical of the front row, props of Slimani and Boyle. Maybe the issue is that the 5 guys in behind them are a bit lightweight. Deeney and Mangan, they're not the biggest of second rows. And then you compound that with Penny in the back row, Culhan at 8 and O'Connor at 7. It was a light back 5 behind them. And when you're playing against a massive South African pack, maybe you're thinking when we're playing over there, we have to have a minimum size of forwards, whereas maybe you can get away with that against weaker opposition.
They're a bit short, I think, on locks. Obviously, James Ryan is working his way back from the lines. He got that head injury. Snyman is away. So I think they are a bit light in more ways than one in that second row department. And you're probably right. And they had Andrew Sparrow on the bench who came off. He's only a young tight head. So they were sort of inexperienced. And in many ways, you want the younger players to be tested. This was the whole idea of the brilliance of the South African teams coming in, was because young Irish players get tested. And Leinster were really keen to move this South African tour to earlier in the season because it has been in the back end. They wanted it earlier, they got it, and now they're probably be careful what you wish for. But it's a great opportunity for them to bounce back. Like I said, we'll probably learn a lot about the younger guys in particular because they won't have been in situations like this before or under this kind of pressure. Like I said, it's still very early on in the season, but you don't want to be coming back from South Africa and they're playing, is it the Sharks, I think, then when they come back, first game back. So you don't want to be falling that far behind, but there's still 17 games left in the regular season. It's not panic stations.
No, I wouldn't think so. And just the last one, we haven't spoken in a while. Last season, obviously, there's the Northampton implosion, and there's a bit of kind of fallout from that, and Barrett on the bench, and Rory was on here to a certain tetchiness in the squad or division, or just wasn't necessarily the happiest of camps. And then we saw Leinster kind of siege mentality, Ryan Baird to the fore of that, and they
Cullen as well.
Yeah, and they win the URC, and so that means that the aftertaste is them doing a lap of honour at Croke Park, and now they're all back together and going again. What's your sense of where they are as a group, psychologically
and bigger picture kind of thing? Well, obviously, when we talk about Leinster, it's always framed through, how are they set to win the Champions Cup? And I think them winning the URC last season, I'm not saying in this room, but I think it got downplayed a little bit. I thought that was really impressive, the job they did to the Bulls at Croke Park. It cost Jake White his job ultimately. Johan Ackermann is in charge of the Bulls now, who Leinster are going to face at the weekend. But I thought that was a super, super impressive performance. Physicality, the scrum, the set piece. Sam Prendergast was very good. All the things that weren't quite good last weekend. So I think in terms of getting the monkey off the back, getting over the line in a big game, that was hugely important, and it will be for the long season ahead. But if you're asking me right now at the start of the season in terms of Leinster's Champions Cup prospects, absolutely they're going to be thereabouts. But I couldn't sit here and tell you confidently that I believe Leinster are in a better place now, particularly than they were last season when they had Jordy Barrett here. Rico Ioane is going to come in after November. He's been bombed out of the All Black squad because his form hasn't been great. He's been playing NPC with Auckland. He hadn't played NPC rugby in 5 years, and I didn't get to see the NPC game, but I don't believe he played very well in that either. He's been shifted from the centre back out onto the wing, so there's this question mark of where he fits in. Will he fit in? He's obviously a world-class operator, but I think this time last year, and with the way the season played out with Toulouse losing Dupont and all that, I think Leinster were in a far better position this time last year.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, 5:30, the Bulls, South Africa. Sorry, final word.
Yeah, no, I just think on that point, I think a big challenge for Leo this year is more than ever there's a 2-tiered squad in Leinster, because there was just so many guys involved in the Lions, and maybe the group at the weekend were feeling a bit demotivated. And it's actually something that Leo has done well in previous years. Off the back of that Sharks win last year, he promoted guys who played well in that game.
Deegan, I think,
likes of Deegan, even Fintan Gunn got opportunities off the back of it. He is loyal to guys who perform for him, but our guys looking up that mountain going, it's too big a mountain to climb. They're not going to drop a Lions player for me, and that's the issue with that player thinking that way. But could the coaches motivate them in a certain way and that's going to be really important for Leinster as the season progresses.
Yeah. Okay, so again, that's Saturday, like I said, 5:30 in South Africa. Also on Saturday, we have Connacht Scarlets, and then 7:45 on Saturday, so 3 games on the Saturday. Munster against Cardiff. 7:45 Munster against Cardiff. They kicked off the Clayton Macmillan era with a win away to Scarlets, 34 points to 21, albeit at half-time it was 13-0, and then it was 20-0 early in the second half, so they were very comfortable really throughout. Tries from Craig Casey, Mike Haley, Dan Kelly on his debut, and Thomas Ahern. Welsh rugby, the kind of backdrop was evident. There were 9,000 fans there, which isn't, the greatest number for like opening night when there's a bit of extra enthusiasm. And then there was a protest outside the ground. Obviously, in Welsh rugby, much of the summer has been caught up in the Welsh Rugby Union plan to cut the number of professional teams from 4 to 2. So all of that's going on over there. Nonetheless, though, on the road, first game under new coach, it's a nice way for Munster to start. What would you tell us about what we now know Clayton Macmillan Munster team are going to do?
I was impressed with Munster at the weekend. I think he's gone old school with the preseason training. We've heard about the boxing, the hill runs, and trying to get that kind of culture back, not back in Munster, but the same culture that he was able to develop with the Chiefs. And you could see that on the pitch. A player makes a mistake, how hard are his teammates scrambling to cover up that mistake? Lockman misses a tackle. Jack O'Donoghue chases back. A lost cause. Yeah. One of those ones you could easily just go, that's going to be a try. No, I'll sprint back. It's probably a 1 in 20 chance of saving it. He does save it.
Yeah. It was what Macmillan picked up on after TV.
Okay.
On the TV,
And I'd say if that's his theme of pre-season and he's seeing that coming through in games, he's like, right, I'm onto something. I've got a good group of players here who are buying into where I want to go.
His mantra just on that in pre-season about the all the old school approach, apparently the mantra was just find a way. That was the buzzwords that they were using, and I thought, you're right, Jack O'Donoghue epitomised that, just find a way. That was a walk-in try. I think it was Josh McLeod who was running to pass it, and it was obviously designed to push them mentally and physically during pre-season for moments like that, because there was another one in the second half where Jack O'Donoghue made an amazing cover tackle on the far side as well. So yeah, just find a way. Sorry to interrupt you, but that was sort of the mantra of Clayton Macmillan's pre-season.
Yeah, and then like the basics of the game, physicality. I was impressed with both Munster and Connacht's physicality in particular. I know we'll get to Connacht, but that was both sides of the ball and how they carried the ball, how they were able to keep the gain line. There's no getting away from it. The challenge for Munster this year is can their front 5 forwards impose themselves on big opposition, the likes of Bulls, Stormers, Leinster, big French opposition.
Who are their front 5 these days? It's their strongest front 5.
Well, I like Michael Milne and Lee Barron have both come in for Leinster. They came in at the tail end of last season, and I thought in the bits that they played, Michael Milne ended up getting capped by Ireland, not necessarily on just off the back of what he did, because he had plenty of good games for Leinster, but I think it's only a matter of time before those two guys are first choice. I think Lee Barron is an outstanding athlete, very much in the kind of modern hooker, Dan Sheehan, Malcolm Marks kind of mould, and I thought he was very good when he came on at the weekend. I think you've seen enough from Milne to suggest that he'll be the starting loose head. So you've got the two of them, Ollie Jaeger, who I thought played very well at the weekend. They brought him in from the Crusaders, relatively big reputation. He did well down there. There was talks of him getting capped by the All Blacks because he qualified on residency and had an injury sort of hit start to his Munster career, but I thought he looked very good. So if he can stay fit, I think you're looking at a front row of Michael Milne, Lee Barron and Ollie Jaeger, and the second row pretty much picks itself, I think, with Jean Klein and Tyg Byrne. Although if they can get Edwin Adogbo back fit, there's a lot of excitement in Munster about him. He injured his Achilles for the second time last season, but he is a big unit, very much in kind of the tight head lock mode like Joe McCarthy. So there's a bit of excitement around him. He could force his way in, but right now I think it would be Tyg Byrne and Sean Klein. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, and no, I would agree. And I think that front 5 is a good front 5.
Okay.
What they don't have that Leinster do have is the next 5 behind that and the next 5 behind that. So if we get 10 games into the season and Munster start picking up injuries, can the guys in behind that step up? And that's where they've struggled, like in the last 2 seasons. Now, they've also had an injury crisis in the last 2 seasons, which hasn't helped. So if they can keep players fit, that is also tied into it. But that, I think, is going to be the big area that Munster really need to step up, because that backline now is beginning to really take shape. They've a brilliant halfback pairing in Casey, and I was really impressed with Crowley at the weekend. It's been well publicised that he didn't take a break over the summer. He got his own S&C coach in, and he looked really fit. Not that he wasn't fit last year, but he just looked more athletic. He looked a bit quicker. He looked a bit jinkier. He looked very confident in how he was carrying the ball into contact. He kicked the ball really well. And he came on at half time. JJ got injured and they made the sub at half time. And I think the first 3 touches of the ball led to Munster scoring a try. And even his body language was just like, yeah, that's what I do. I was loving it, and he was just happy to be back out there. Dan Kelly's a good signing in the centre, like straight up and down centre, really tough guy. But when opportunities present itself, he's got speed. He's a good passer of the ball, as is Nankiville. And then you've got real speed on in particular on the left wing with Thacker Abrahams, really good players. So like they do have a good starting 15, and if they can keep guys fit, yeah, they can 100% challenge at the top end of the league.
And the one area we didn't mention is the back row. They actually have a couple of really exciting talents coming through there. We saw Brian Gleeson starting number 8.
Did very well.
Very well. Like his break from the back of the scrum was obviously the most eye-catching moment, and he's been one of the best players for the Ireland 20s in the last few years to have come through. I remember last season I was over in Munster, played Cast in France, like that kind of like your stereotypical tough away French venue, and it was a real shock. Munster started Brian Gleeson instead of Gavin Coombs. He had a tough night there, but they believe that I think he is going to be the future. Not necessarily right now, because Gavin Coombs is still a very important player for Munster, but I think he gives you more dynamism, more athleticism from the back of the scrum. And the one other guy who I want to mention is Ruan Quinn, who's coming through. I think we're probably going to see him this weekend. A really super talent. Probably end up maybe playing open side. He's coming through. Killaloe, Ballina, sort of Anthony Foley territory. Keith Wood's sons are coming through there. Rosie Foley's son, Oisin Minogue, who was playing for the 20s this year, but he's a super talent coming through there. So when you knit that all together, it's a strong nucleus. But you're so right in terms of, we saw it over the last few years, particularly last year, in terms of how hard Munster were hit by injuries, and that's why they've gone old school in terms of the pre-season. Is they're trying to build up the strength and the size of the Munster players. And I think you mentioned Jack Crowley, and I fully agree with you. I thought his role it was the Mike Haley try, wasn't it? He ended up getting 3 touches on the ball in that same move. He looked really slick, and Craig Casey just picked up where he left off with Ireland. I thought over the summer he had a brilliant tour, obviously captaining Ireland for the first time. Last week was his first time captaining Munster. So when you knit it all together, it's a real strong nucleus. But if they lose a couple of players in key positions, that's what's really hurt Munster over last year. But they've tried to rectify it by bringing in the likes of Mill and Byrne. I agree with you. Dan Kelly looked really good last season. JJ has come back. Andrew Smith has signed. So they're trying to add to the depth without maybe the big name signings that Leinster have made, or they made in the past with Snyman and Damien Dialende.
I must admit, when I saw the reports over the last week or so about their pre-season, given the injuries last year, that this season for the pre-season we're going old school, I thought, I don't want old, I want cutting edge. I don't want old school. I'm not running up a hill. I need S&C in here, and I need cutting edge data.
I have a theory about that, because when I heard that as well, I was kind of thinking, has the game not really moved on? Because Connacht went the total opposite way and adopted, like Stuart Lancaster, just constantly have the ball in your hand. But my theory on that is because Clayton Macmillan was coming in to an already settled coaching staff with Mike Prendergast running the attack, Dennis Leamy defence. Okay, Alex Codling ended up missing most of the pre-season because he was with the Ireland women's team. I think he kind of came in and gave a lot of trust to the rugby per se that had been played last season, and it was more the S&C side. He's brought in his own head of athletic performance, Brad Mayo, who he would have worked with in New Zealand. So apart from Brad Mayo and the team manager, Martin Verico, I think, he's working with pre-existing staff there. And I think that was part of his thinking, was to, okay, let's give a bit of trust there to what's been going on, because Munster had a relatively decent season, you'd have to say, last year. And I think slowly but surely as we move through the season, I think you'll start seeing Clayton Macmillan put his imprint on the team more so. I don't think he wanted to come in and say, okay, well, we're ripping up everything and starting from scratch here, because there was a lot of solid foundations.
Yeah, well, I also think that's a wise decision, because I think the group are a little bit worn out by change.
Of course, yeah.
New coach, new game plan, new culture. We go again. There's just been so much upheaval. I think a degree of continuity was probably quite a relief to them than a completely new staff. Was there anything in their attack that struck you as interesting? Like, I don't know much about what Macmillan's going to bring in that sense, or like, is it still very much, well, this, as Keane was alluding to, worked well under Mike Prendergast, let's keep it going, but better?
Yeah, it is that. Like, Mike Prendergast runs a very good attack. You've got an excellent halfback pairing in Casey and Crowley that know how to run it. They're looking to improve on that as opposed to seeing, right, we're moving from a 1-3-3-1 to a 1-4-2-1.
So you saw the same shape, the same.
Very similar shape. But yeah, probably run a bit better. More of a focus on keeping the ball alive. I saw that across Munster, Ulster and Connacht. Well, sorry, Munster and Ulster in particular. Definitely looking like the way the rules have gone now. It is easy. It is a lot easier to turn the ball over as the defensive team than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So avoiding those breakdowns is important. And I think Munster and Ulster in particular, we're just trying to keep the ball alive.
Okay, so when you say keep it alive, you mean avoid rucks?
Yeah, exactly. So as you're getting tackled,
get it out.
Can you offload, or even if you're on the ground, can you pop it up? And trying to resource rucks quicker and avoiding having that contest over the ball.
I think we're going to see more kicking as well from him. I was down in Limerick a couple of weeks ago at his first press conference, Clayton Macmillan, and he was kind of asked about, what will his style of play be, and I think he was keen to get across. Maybe a lot of supporters see, a Kiwi head coach is coming in. This is going to be all singing, all dancing. And he was like, look at the stats of the best teams. I think he was probably talking about France kicked the ball a hell of a lot. The Springboks obviously kicked the ball a hell of a lot. That, it's not all going to be razzle-dazzle, Kiwi rugby, here we go. So I think there is a huge element of pragmatism in terms of how he sees the game. He's sort of a no-nonsense character. So I think that's what I mean by when the season goes on and we start seeing his imprint more, I think the kicking game will be really important. And like we already mentioned in Craig Casey and Jack Crowley, they've got two excellent kickers.
Yeah, and two guys actually, the fire's been lit underneath them. Like Jack Crowley, I'm not surprised he trained right through the summer. I would too. Under the circumstances, and then like Craig Casey, not in Andy Farrell's first three lines, then Ben White gets the call.
Yeah,
fairly right. Him and Jack looking at each other saying, let's go. So that's a great thing to have as your kind of engine, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
No, it is, and I think Casey played a big part in persuading Crowley to stay put, and they were saying, look, let's build something special here. And I know Zeeb said he thinks that they're the best halfback pairing in Ireland. I don't agree with that at this point, but what I would say is Casey is improving. He's in the right age profile to continue to improve. Gibson Park is a brilliant number 9, probably number 2 behind Dupont, but he's older. Is he going to continue getting better? Probably not. Can Casey and Crowley have a partnership that is incredible for Munster, that Andy Farrell's looking at it going, I want to carry that in?
That's the thing. If it's a close call, gets to Prendergast and Casey, or it's a close call in Farrell's mind, if Casey and Crowley are humming.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rugby to be played before that next World Cup.
Casey's
two full seasons.
The improvements I think that Casey has made in his own game has been massive. I think when he first came onto the scene, there was a bit of kind of, hair and scare him. Everything was done at 90 miles an hour, which is a bit of his USP, along with his passes immaculate. But I think now there's more composure when you get into that red zone. His pass selection at the weekend, in terms of throwing skip passes, I'm thinking the one he threw out wide for the first try, was exceptional. And his partnership, like he's played with Jack Crowley all the way up in underage rugby, played for the Ireland under 20. So
there's a lot more authority just to his general play.
Yeah, and like
he's running the thing as opposed to just energy.
And he is
knowing when to play quick and when to slow.
And he is a future Munster captain. I've no doubt in my mind about that. I know Ty Byrne is obviously continuing this year. He's 33. He's at the back end of his career. I don't think it was a coincidence that Craig Casey captained Munster opening game of the season off the back of I know it was a pretty young Ireland squad over the summer, but still a massive honour to lead that. Like he was one of the senior guys and he led it really, really well.
Yeah, no, we sat through the Portugal game, still talking about it.
That's why Jack Crowley's doing extra.
All-time classic.
That's why Jack Crowley's doing extra reps.
Because about 5 minutes in, I was like, what's this?
Joe, try being there.
Oh my God.
At least
I'll tell you what though, from that game, I remember there was a kick through and you're kind of looking at each other, what's going to happen next? kicked through by Ireland, and then we gathered it up and scored a try. And I go, you will never see that happen again.
Yeah.
And then it happened in the South African-Argentina game. And Zulu put a kick through that looked like he was going for a 50-22.
Yeah.
No backfield cover, and then goes up and regathers it. But yeah, Portugal were really...
Lads, I know you were doing it from studio, but just a very quick side point. You wouldn't believe how amateurish it was over there. Ireland arrived for their captain's run on the Friday, and there was no scoreboard or shot clock. Like, they had to go, where's the score there? Like, the Portuguese, all right, okay. Like, the TMO obviously broke. It was
pretty bad.
It was pretty amateur hour. And, Jack Crowley, obviously, he set a record, I think, in that game for most conversions, record score and all that. But what does it really matter when we come back into November? It wasn't the game of the two to be playing.
I hadn't appreciated the fall-off from the World Cup because through sheer ignorance, I thought that's going to be great fun.
Yeah, and
it wasn't.
And I think the IRFU probably thought that as
well.
Yeah. And they deserve credit for going and giving them a chance. But God, it was. Yeah,
it was a waste of everyone's time.
I think it was a big missed opportunity. I think the IRFU will look back on that with regret versus the tour that England had in Argentina, where they were able to look at their depth chart against quality opposition. Even Scotland's tour, Wales, they still had competitive games.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was.
The Georgia game was good, and
it was reasonably competitive. It was in poor conditions.
Horrible conditions.
Didn't help.
Dug it out.
Yeah. No, you would have learned a bit from that game for sure. Yeah.
Mad segue.
Yeah. To matters at hand then. Connacht. Where are they on Saturday? Oh, lunchtime kickoff, 1:45. Connacht against Scarlet. So they started life under Stuart Lancaster with a win against Benetton, 26 points to 15. Bonus point win. They were 12-3 up at half time. Josh Ioane with a try. Sean Nocton on his debut. Dylan Tierney Martin and Sean Jansen with a try. So Lancaster, there's two things here. One, presumably Connacht have improved their defence because last year and maybe even a bit beyond, that was just an Achilles heel every weekend. I mean, it was like, put me down for what I said last week about Connacht when you were analysing them. So that's question one. And then question two is, what's Stuart Lancaster going to bring here in attack? So, both sides of the ball.
I was, first off, very impressed with their physicality. There is a Lancaster blueprint that you can recognise to an extent. Obviously, we know it well with what he did with Leinster. It's around the corner, it's on the gain line, really accurate at the breakdown. It's quite prescriptive in the sense that players know, I'm at breakdown number 1. Other players know, I'm at breakdown number 3. You've got 2 players arriving at speed with force, driving the opposition back. And it is very hard to poach the ball when a team is really well drilled like that, because you're not necessarily moving the ball from width to width. There wasn't a whole lot of expanse in that Connacht performance at the weekend, but there was a huge amount of physicality. Like, they really stuck it to a physical Benetton side.
Slightly different then to what you're saying about Munster and keeping the ball alive. Connacht, because they're more organised, are happy to take their chances in there with breakdowns.
Yeah, I think back to the Challenge Cup game last year against Racing. Connacht went 21-3 up, playing a kind of loose game. Racing got a player sent off after 20 minutes. You're thinking, right, surely they're going to get over the line here. But they were playing this loose game. They had no other way of playing. They couldn't go back to playing tight, keep the gain line, keep the ball, frustrate the opposition, eke errors out of them. Whereas looking at them at the weekend, that blueprint beats a lot of teams in the league, probably gets them top 8. And then the way Lancaster is, what layers can he build on that foundation? So that's what I really like.
This is the baseline.
This is the baseline. We bring this physicality every week. And then this is what we're focusing on this week. This is what we're focusing on. And you're adding strings to the bow. That's what a good coach brings in, that foundation. And look, he's one of the best in the business. And yeah, look, I was impressed. Benetton are a good side. They actually looked a bit blunt force themselves. I think they thought that they could outmuscle Connacht, and they probably could have last year, but not anymore.
So is that just attitude?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they've lost a couple of players as well. Like Brex has left.
No, but I mean like
With Connacht.
yeah.
Yeah, attitude and mindset and knowing what to do. Like I was disappointed with Connacht's kicking out of hand last year. They didn't kick the ball. They weren't able to relieve pressure off themselves. Whereas they were just much more structured and pragmatic in how they plotted themselves away. And look, Benetton scored a couple of tries, but they had to work so hard for them.
Yeah.
They were going back over the halfway line going, geez, that was tough work.
Yeah, but it's funny that it just comes down to attitude and mindset a little bit, because I would have thought last year and beyond, there would have been many a team meeting where they would have said, lads, this stops those type of tries, or lack of physicality, or not running back, not scrambling, all these kind of things people were talking about. They that has to stop. Maybe it's a kind of naive notion, but I just would have assumed Connacht above all else have attitude number one, the underdog fighting spirit. And I guess you'd have to say Lancaster comes in and sort of exposes the fact that, well, they didn't last year. All the criticisms of last year were probably very fair.
Yeah, I struggled to identify with Connacht's defence last year. You know, Scott Fardy was leading it up. I didn't know whether they were, you know, the Aussie style of shepherding teams to the touchline, forcing them to make errors, going hard at the wide breakdowns, or the Leinster style of the high press, or putting two in the tackle, or getting players isolated, trying to create a mull. I couldn't tell you what it was.
That makes more sense to me than the Connacht players going, meh.
I'm going to try a bit harder. I'm going to be more physical.
A systematic, that makes more sense.
So what I think it comes down to is the defence coach now presenting to Stuart, right? Or Stuart presenting to the players and saying, this is exactly what I'm after. Total clarity in the defensive system.
And if you have clarity, then you can throw yourself into things a bit more. Yeah, okay.
I think from the outside looking in, I think it probably got a bit muddled in terms of like too many cooks almost, because when Pete Wilkins initially came in, I think it was under Kieran Keane was his first season, which was obviously a disaster when Kieran Keane was in charge, but he initially came in as defence coach and earned a really strong reputation as a really good defence coach. But when he took over from Andy Friend, he became head coach but focused more on the attack. And then I think last season he started moving back towards the defence in terms of trying to help out Scott Fardy. And I don't know were there just too many voices, because it was a systematic errors. Like I said earlier, in terms of Leinster's defence last weekend, I didn't think that was the Stormers picking apart Leinster systematically, whereas at times last year Connacht they were too passive, they were too soft in the tackle, which is an awful thing to say about a professional rugby player. But I think the base was so low that Lancaster came in. Look, he coaches both sides of the ball, which is pretty rare in the modern game, but because Connacht had already recruited Rob Sieb to look after the attack, I think it's allowed Lancaster, look, he's going to have the final say in terms of the attacking framework, but I think it's allowed him to come in and focus on the defence. And I thought it was a marked improvement. I was having to look back on it last season. Connacht only conceded one try in one game, if you know what I mean. They conceded 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 against the Dragons in October. They were seconds away from matching that record last week, and then they conceded a soft enough try at the end, which I think Stuart Lancaster will be raging with, because they had defended quite well. The try just after half time was a bit of Menicello brilliance, who he's a super player. Dylan Tierney-Martin gets kind of caught in a one-on-one tackle. So again, that's more of an error rather than a systematic failure. And a bit like we were talking about Munster in terms of the last-ditch tackling, there were a couple of big examples of that in the Connacht game. Shane Bolton early on makes a tackle on the big Fijian winger that Benetton have. Unbelievable tackle. He's a guy I'm really excited about this season, Shane Bolton. He got capped on that summer tour that we were talking about. But that was the kind of thing we just didn't see enough of from Connacht last season, putting their bodies on the line. In the second half, Bolton combined with Caelan Blade to make a brilliant double cover tackle on the same Benetton player, stopped another try. That's potentially 14 points that you're looking at. Could be a different game then, whereas they were putting their bodies on the line. And I think that maybe it's too easy to say, oh, that's the new coach bounce or whatever, but I've no doubt that whatever Lancaster was doing in pre-season and the focus on defence, that had a big part to play in terms of that mindset that we're talking about.
So they've two very winnable games next, Scarlets at home and then Cardiff away, and they'll be up and running and confidence will grow and belief in everything Lancaster is telling them will grow. It's amazing how far 2016 suddenly is. Like, it'll be a decade next May. How far away, given the talent pool there allied to Lancaster, how far away are Connacht, do you think, from really challenging for a URC title? Not a realistic expectation or aim this year.
to really challenge this year.
To get to a semi-final, but a final, like to be in the mix.
I think a good season for Connacht this year is top 8, similar to Ulster, top 8, and a really good run in the Challenge Cup. Are they good enough to win that quarter final of the URC with their squad? I don't think so right now.
Yeah.
And I'd argue that Ulster possibly have a bit more talent if everyone's fit, and you've a good season and you build your way into it. But it's very close between those two sides.
Okay.
And then I'd have Munster above that, and Leinster still number 1. But if it's about building momentum back in. It's one good performance. Can they build on that again this week? And they've got the right coaching staff. They have a very good playing group. Like even Ioane at the weekend, like he's now figured out what it's like to play in the URC. He did a lot of finding his feet last year. You can't play the running rugby that you play in Super Rugby. You need to be able to kick the ball well. And Jack Carty came on. He had a tough year last year. He came on. He looked like a new guy.
It was a pity to see Ioane go off.
It was.
I think Lancaster's the kind of coach who will, buy into the way he plays, but adding those nuances, which you obviously know a lot more about, the 10 play, because his kicking from hand wasn't great, missing a few goal kicks as well. So I think that's a major plus, I think, for Connacht as well. Hopefully his injury isn't too serious, but they've only brought in one player who hasn't even arrived yet, Sam Gilbert. He's going to come after the NPC from New Zealand. He's a fullback who can play all across the backline. So what you want is the guys who were there to go to a new level. And I thought, look, not reading too much into the opening game of the season, but I thought a couple of guys did that. I thought Sam Illo, we talk about the aggression that the pack brought, but here's a big tight head who's come down from Leinster a couple of years ago, wants to make a name for himself. I thought he was outstanding today. Fiachna Barrett, who came off the bench, big boy as well. I think he's only about 20, 21. He was outstanding when he came on. Paul Boyle and Sean Jansen in the back row. Connacht aren't the biggest team. I mean, that's not exactly a hot take. So you need these guys punching above their weight. And they did that against the Benetton team who, you touched on it, Mads, that they were quite niggly. There was a couple of high shots in that game as well. And Sam, there was a couple of scraps then afterwards, and Sam Illo was invariably one of the guys in it. And I love to see that from a younger guy, unheralded. So it's a big season, I think, for guys like that. Obviously, Finlay Beelan back into the team, Bundy Aki back into the team, Mac Hansen. And they're starting 15, a bit like Munster, if they have everyone fit, is quite strong. But I think it's the depth is the issue. And if they are going to have a run at the Challenge Cup, trying to balance fighting on both fronts will be the big issue.
It's uncovering guys like Sam Illo at tight head who can come on for Finlay Beelan at 60 minutes and provide real impact. A guy that we wouldn't have heard of a whole lot before. He's had his injury troubles, I presume, but he looks like a really impressive athlete. Someone like Hugh Gavin, homegrown guy from Connacht, can he step up under Lancaster's tutelage and really improve, learn off Bundy, create an unbelievable centre partnership that could be an option for Ireland? That's what Connacht need to be producing their own, to then be challenging at the top end of the table. But if you were to compare them to full strength Bulls, Leinster, Stormers, they're still a step away from that.
Okay. Ulster will be away to Edinburgh on the Friday night coming, 8:05. They beat the Dragons in round 1, 42 points to 21, 7 tries. Mark Sexton, their attack coach, which is kind of interesting, obviously, to watch. And after Edinburgh Friday, they're Bulls and then go down to South Africa to face Sharks and Lions. So 3 South African sides on the spin after Edinburgh and Friday. So it's a tough start to the season in many ways. The piece that people will see on social media that you've done up with pictures, we can just talk about now a little bit. So you clocked that a couple of the players around the game, and Richie Murphy post-game spoke about best space. And you were saying this is like a philosophy in rugby, simple one, but very effective one when it's done well. So best space, I presume it's pretty close to what it says in the tin.
Yeah, it is. And I was coached by Richie Murphy in schools rugby, and then worked with him as he was the kicking coach, but also would have played a big part in the attack, whether it was with Leinster or Ireland, and then he's progressed from the under-20s. I really enjoyed Richie's philosophy on rugby. He was a very enjoyable coach to play under, great guy to do reviews and previews with, and you could build your way into the season working with them, because it comes down to accountability, and that's what best space gives you. So best space isn't necessarily playing width to width or carrying the ball straight in front of you, or a short side attack, or kicking the ball. it's all of those things, but it's giving the ownership to the players to assess your options, communicate with each other, ultimately make your decision, and then execute on it. And he's brought Mark Sexton in to, run the attacking sessions in training to work on the skill set of players that when they see the opportunities that they can execute on it. And there was a period of probably 20 minutes in the first half that I was very impressed. I could see it coming together.
Is it a high stakes philosophy in that when it's going well and people are in a state of flow and seeing the space well, it can look beautiful, but on a bad day it can look like this crowd don't know what they're at? Blind alleys, wrong options, it's a mess.
Yeah, if you start doubting yourself, and like Richie touched on it, when we spoke to him, he was like, yeah, I thought we overplayed for a period of time in the first half. That's him saying that best base wasn't necessarily moving the ball to width.
It does feel like a kind of it tilts towards flair and like attacking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed, best space, I'm going to kick it again. Doesn't feel like the most exciting option, even if it's the right one.
And that's why players really enjoy it,
Yeah.
because it brings accountability. Why did you run it? I ran it because I saw that there was potentially a 3-on-2 on the edge, and that's why I went to it.
No problems there.
Yeah. The easy thing to do is to kick the ball because it's high percentage. You're probably going to keep coaches happy. But there's other systems out there where you could be playing from your own half, and coaches would say you get one phase or two phases in your own half, and then we kick the ball no matter what. And if you then have a player go, well, on the third phase of that, I decide to run it, I get caught, you're in big trouble. Or you decide to run it and you don't get caught and you make a line break and you score a try. Does the coach go, oh no, that was okay because we scored a try? You can end up, with this very awkward one rule for one guy, another rule for another guy. Whereas if you have accountability with players saying what they saw, and then maybe it comes down to execution. So maybe you can say, look, I thought best space was on the edge. We went there. The player gets hit man and ball. Maybe the pass wasn't good enough. So then you're looking at the execution of the pass. Can your pass be faster? Can you run in a different angle? Can you give it earlier?
Yeah. But you see in the 3v2 and going for it.
That's the important part.
I've no problems with that kind of thing. Yeah, it is terribly difficult. I do wonder about the more prescribed teams where we could be watching a game and you do feel on halfway, God, there's an overlap. There's one extra out here. And player kicks it and you think, you are just... But he may well turn around and say, I'm playing for a coach that if I take that on, I could see, if you can see the 3v2, I think I could see it, but I know I'm a dead man if I go in there and don't throw that pass. That strikes me as a terrible way to have to play your rugby.
Yeah, it is. And it comes down to a data thing of not going, right, I'm going to assess that one play or that one action, that one decision to kick or that one decision to pass. It's going, if you had that opportunity 100 times, was that the right decision? Did it come down to execution? Yeah. Did it come down to the opponents coming up with a big defensive play, a big tackle?
It's the problem with relying on data too much, because for sure across the course of a season 100 times the percentage play could be not to throw that pass. But what the data can't measure is, how do I feel in that moment? Am I confident? Is it in the first 10 minutes of the game and everybody's got energy, or is it in the last 5 minutes of the game and concentration is down because we're not feeling good and we're not confident? Like, there's a million different factors that you can just say, well, 100 times across the season, that ends up in a turnover, we're dead. It doesn't allow for the fact that, but I felt really good and I just sensed I had us beaten and I knew we were going well in training that week. We weren't 3 weeks ago, but we were this week, so I did it. The data can't measure that stuff as well.
No, you can make the wrong decision, but make that wrong decision into the right one. And I'll show it in the clips. You see, Stuart McCluskey turns down a 2-on-1 to just take on his opposition. Opposite number in a duel, but he barrels over him. Suddenly the wrong decision's the right one.
So he can say to Richie, I know 2v1 it was wrong, I just knew, I smelt it, I knew I had it. Yeah,
or I thought it was the right time to physically impose ourselves on the opposition. We were 7-0 down. I wanted to send a clear message out. But yeah, look, it is fascinating. And the other side to it is as well is like, yeah, if we play a box kicking game throughout the match, are we going to come out on top? Or are our strengths in the wide channels? With Zach Ward and Stockdale and Balakoon to come back fit and Mike Lowry at fullback. Maybe for Ulster, it's just about getting the ball into those wide channels as much as possible. Yeah. If they can do that 10, 15, 20 times in a game, do the odds of them winning go up with the more times that the ball goes into the wide channels?
And I think absolutely it does, but I think Ulster's problem will be getting the ball and a solid enough platform to get the ball to those kind of guys, because I think they look Angus Bell and Augustus are amazing signings, and Augustus made his debut off the bench. Angus Bell will come in after November. They'll make a big difference, but I still think in a couple of areas Ulster look a little bit light and underpowered. So if they don't have the platform, it's all well and good scoring 6 tries against the Dragons at home. I would be, and I'm not surprised. Like, Ulster's attack is pretty good, and I think Mark Sexton is an excellent attack coach. I think Connacht were pretty gutted to have lost him, and it's interesting now that Richie Murphy has basically assembled the Grand Slam winning Ireland under-20s coaching staff, Willie Falloon taking over defence. But for me, it's the defensive side of things, a bit like Connacht, that just has to improve. Their defensive record last season was awful. They got rid of Johnny Bell, and Willie Falloon came in towards the end of last season, so he'd already been in there. Not enough time to get his ideas across, granted, but conceding 3 tries, not to be a Debbie Downer now, sorry, but to concede 3 tries at home to the Dragons,
yeah, for sure,
not great. I mean, you're not going to outscore a lot of teams. I don't think Ulster are, and like the opening try that they conceded, you can imagine, we've just spoke about the emphasis that Connacht would have put on their defence in pre-season. I'd imagine it would be very similar up in Ulster. You know, nothing silly lads early on, and they concede a try from the opening kickoff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, bizarre stuff, but like,
no, 42-21 at home to the Dragons is mixed.
That's what I mean.
It really
so
is. You're absolutely right.
And I don't think you're going to score 6 tries every week against certain teams, and certainly if you're leaking 3 tries at home, that to me would be a concern. So they've got to get their defence right, because I totally agree with Ian, their outside backs are electric and will cause problems. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts on kind of what you think of, we praised Munster's half-backs. Like, there's a lot of responsibility on Nathan Doak's shoulders now, because Jack Murphy has suddenly become Ulster's first choice 10 at 21, only just after being promoted out of the academy. It's a big ask, I think, for a 21-year-old, isn't it, to kind of steer the ship through these choppy waters?
Yeah, 100%. Just for context, Jack Murphy, like, there's Jake Flannery, but Jack Murphy is kind of their de facto. Yeah,
Aid Morgan has left. He had a really, that signing just didn't work out at all. And now all of a sudden, you have Jack Murphy, Richie's son, 21 years old, fresh out of the academy, steering the ship through what is a new era in a highly pressurised position. And if something was to happen to him, touch wood, God, they look very light to me at 10.
And when he doesn't have a good game, the word nepotism will be thrown at him like you wouldn't believe. That's the nature of the world. So sorry.
Yeah, no,
really
it's an area that Ulster need Doak and Jack Murphy to really step up. I think it suits Doak that John Cooney's moved on, as phenomenal as John was for Ulster. When they were chopping and changing last year, or Doak lost his form, or is playing, a couple of mistakes in the game, you're nearly looking over the touchline going, is John warming up? John very much had the love of the supporters. They wanted to see him starting week in, week out. Yeah, and Jack Murphy last year came into a pretty disjointed side, came in kind of mid-season, didn't have a pre-season, which is very important as an out half. That's when you can build your cohesion with the players around you. Look, when I'm in this position, I want you to stand flatter. I want you to stand deeper on this occasion. I need you to tell me this in this instance, especially as a young guy. A full pre-season makes a big difference, and Ulster had a long one because they didn't make the playoffs last year, so there was plenty of time for them to build that over the summer. But they are light at halfback, behind Doak and Murphy. You've got Jake Flannery there at 10. Jake has had a disjointed run of it with Ulster with injury. If he can get himself back fit, is his best position out half, centre or fullback? I still think it's probably out half. But Jack is going to get a run at it, and would have to lose form, or Ulster go on a losing streak for them to change things there.
Quite exciting for Irish rugby though.
Yeah.
To see a 21-year-old get a long run in the saddle and see what happens.
No, and it's exciting for Ulster. What can these two guys build together? Like, the strengths of the two guys, they both kick the ball well.
Yeah, Jack Murphy, I know you'd appreciate that. He's a beautiful striker of the ball.
If Richie Murphy's son didn't kick the ball well, it'd be an inquiry.
Yeah, but he does though. There's a beauty, not to sound really kind of arty, but there is a beauty to kind of the way he strikes the ball, really pure.
And then it comes down to, what does the team need from their out half? What does Ulster need from their out half? They don't need a Umgana Zulu running, like a running quarterback. They need someone who can facilitate in the team, get the ball into the key guys' hands, orchestrate them around the pitch, know when's the right time to kick, apply field pressure. And like there was a very good centre partnership there with Hume and McCluskey. Listen to those guys and execute on what they're asking for you to do, and I think he can do that well. The one area that he's going to have to really step up on last year is defensively. And Richie did his best to kind of hide him either in the backfield or in the in the short side. Ultimately, when you're playing against a good side, they will find you.
That's their best space.
Correct. You.
Good to see Stockdale back, by the way, because he was going well and then got injured in the Ireland matches over the summer. So,
Yeah, Jacob looked good, and Zach Ward.
And
Zach goes well.
Big fan of Jude Postlethwaite as well. I thought he had an excellent season last year. You mentioned the centre partnership, but I think he could force his way in potentially at 13 there alongside Stuart McCloskey. I think he's a fine player.
Yeah, no, he is. He's a really good quality young player. Adds a different dimension with his offloading game. But yeah, like Ulster's wingers, you touched on Jacob and Zach Ward. Modern day wingers, that's the way the game's gone. Big, strong guys who've repeat effort. Get up and compete in the air. If your game plan's not going great, but you can go to an accurate box kicking game and getting wingers to compete, you're in with a chance.
Gets you through a lot of games.
Correct.
Fellas, brilliant. Great to get a good sense of all 4 provinces after round 1. So again, Friday, Ulster away to Edinburgh. Saturday, it's 3 Irish provinces all in action. Connacht against Scarlets, 1:45. Leinster Bulls, 5:30. And then Munster Cardiff, 7:45. So that is the plan. Keep an eye out on our various social feeds, be it Twitter at Indo Sport or YouTube. I think it will put it up there as well, or any of the others. I presume we're on do we have a TikTok? Jeez, take this out. Actually, it's humiliating for everyone. On social media, it will be there. So Ian illustrating best space. So we'll hopefully get that going across this season. Cian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Ian Madigan, pleasure.
Thanks for winning, Joe. Cheers, Cian.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.